She's supposed to be able to hear us. I don't feel like there is any.
In federal, state, and local funding to deliver high-impact national service and volunteer programs. We promote volunteerism across the state and also serve as Florida's lead agency for coordinating volunteers and donations before and during disaster. So that's a little bit about Volunteer Florida if you're new to our organization. We really look forward to working with each of you this year to make this the best year ever of the Volunteer Generation Fund grant. So that's a little bit about who we are and what the Volunteer Generation Fund grant seeks to address. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me okay. Okay, good. I don't see anything in the chat box. Okay, well, I'm going to move forward and talk with you about the first slide, what you have in your contract package. And then I'll turn it over actually to Audrey to do this. Your contract package is very important, and that's why we want to spend some time going over each exhibit and give you guidance on the submission deadlines and answer your questions. Audrey?
Yes. So as you all have received that email from me, you will have logged into MicroEdge and started off with step 1, and it gives you a hyperlink to open up your contract package. And so you would see this all of these exhibits along with the provider commission mutual agreement within your that hyperlink. And so again, if for some reason you don't see one of those, let me know and I can make sure to add it. But these are every single thing that's in the package and that we will be going over today.
Okay, so here are 2 of your most important agreements. The provider agreement, it's like the standard contract, and the provider and commission mutual agreement, it's the individualized information. So your provider and commission mutual agreement, I'm going to talk about that first. If you move through it, you'll see it has your name, our name on it. We talk about the term of the grant terminating. It terminates on 9/30/2016 is the end of the contract year. And you see the total amount for your contract for the CNCS share, that's the grant award, and then for your provider share, that's your local match. You also see some information on the type of contract, contract amendment, termination, those sorts of information, pieces of information. And when you complete this, we ask you to include your kind of program person, your volunteer manager, and your fiscal contact. Those 2 people are very important, so we ask that you provide their information. You would sign it and upload it into MicroEdge. We will execute the contract here at Volunteer Florida and provide you a final executed contract with both signatures. And please be aware that this provider and commission mutual agreement, it is inclusive of all of the exhibits that we will now go over. But this is sort of the short version of getting the key information to you as quickly as possible. But it is inclusive of all 9 exhibits. And then I also want to touch on our provider agreement. This is a general Volunteer Florida contract for grantees. And so moving through it, you will see typical contract language for federal and state grants. We want to make sure you're aware that you must and us as a commission fall under the guidance and requirements of the National Community Service Act of 1990 and 1993. And there's some other language about state law that we need to abide by as well. You'll also see information related to reporting, training, online training, and our process for reimbursement, which Debbie will talk with you about a little bit later. One of the most important things in our standard provider agreement is time periods and dates with which you can expect to send us your expenses and your reports, and when you can expect the return of response from Volunteer Florida and, of course, your reimbursement. We also talk a bit about technical assistance and documentation, incident reporting, nepotism, and some of those other pieces. So this is our standard contract. The last thing I'll draw your attention to is just please be aware of the sponsorship information, in that when you're promoting the Volunteer Generation Fund grant, we do request that you include Volunteer Florida, our logo, our name, in that promotion in your website in accordance with the sponsorship section, which is on the last page of the provider agreement. So that's a little bit about the contract and also the mutual agreement. And I'll pause here to see if anybody has any questions about those two pieces. Okay, any questions on the line? We just unmuted you, so if you do have any questions, go ahead. Okay, well, we will move forward.
Actually, hi, Audrey, it's Ann Chernin from, a question, I saw it pop up on the screen about where do we get the logo? Will you be sending it to us?
Oh, great question, absolutely. We will send that to you. And the logo usage is just posted actually on our website under a media link, but it's very easy to find, and we have multiple logos for your use. But we will send you that link. Great question, and thanks for asking.
Okay, and then I have another question. So on the contract, it says December 1 as the start time. So does that mean it's like effective immediately? Mm-hmm. Hello?
Oh, okay, there we go. Great question. That is the start date, December 1, for all VGF contracts. If you received your contract due to clarification questions later than December 1, it will be retroactive to that date.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. Well, we are going to now mute you all again, and we're going to move into the next section and the next exhibit, and then we will unmute you and have some further dialogue.
All right, so Exhibit 2 is your actual Volunteer Generation Fund application and budget. So, and again, it is tailored individually to each organization, and this shows your original application and all of the sections that you had, such as the demographics, the executive narrative, the organizational capacity, the performance measure, the budget narrative, and budget. And so, but the application also includes all of your clarification information that we asked of you and your actual final budget approved by finance. It also includes the places where you say that you'll be doing the volunteering or your skills-based volunteers will be working in, along with all of the performance measures throughout the year. And so again, we want you to use this as the foundation of your program for this Volunteer Generation Fund year, and we will be referencing your application throughout the grant cycle.
All right, so everybody's favorite topic, the National Criminal History Check Status Form. This is Exhibit 3 in your contract package. This language and the importance of this really comes from the federal level, from the Corporation for National and Community Service, because all grantees in the nation must abide by these rules. So I would share with you in reviewing of this form, if you have any questions, first of all, just contact us and ask. But any staff person that is being charged to this grant or any person that's being charged to the match side of the grant, the 3-part background check will need to be completed for those individuals. And the most important one is the NSOPR, the National Sex Offender Predator Registry. This is a name-based search that you can do very simply that will print out a clearance for individuals to make sure that they are cleared of that offense. And when you do this search, you want to make sure that all states and territories are included and that you considered this piece of background check prior to charging for it. So the most important thing I think to take away right now is go ahead and run those NSOPRs on any staff on the match or federal side that you would anticipate charging to this grant. Ideally, it's what's associated in your budget right now, because we can't pay on any costs until that clearance is run and confirmed. And also on your form, you will move through it by indicating what of the three-part checks have been initiated and what have been completed. And then you'll certify with a signature and date, and you'll upload it into MicroEdge. And the three-part background check is the NSOPR, the fingerprint federal FBI check, and the state of Florida or state of residency check. Those are the three checks. We also have several questions about this area, and we'll talk a little bit more about it at our Volunteer Generation Fund training. Many of you will have unique situations, so we're happy to talk with you about those and how they may apply. For those of you that have been a VGF grantee previously, you do not need to complete the three-part check again if there's been less than 120 days, if there has not been a gap of more than 120 days in service. So for example, if you were a VGF grantee and you have a staff that you were charging to the grant last year and you're going to charge that same staff to the grant this year, and there hasn't been more than 120 days in between their service, in other words, you charging them to the grant, you do not have to redo the three-part background check. We do recommend that you simply complete the NSOPR each and every year or on every individual. It is very easy to do, and we found that it helps in future discussions because we don't want to disallow costs. So that is a little bit about Exhibit 3. Oh, I see a great question in the chat. What is the easiest way to accomplish these background checks? Great question. Well, the first place I would direct you to is what is your organization procedure already for staff or volunteers to complete background checks? Some of you have robust experiences and processes for your volunteers, and some of you have similar policies for your staff. So I would first take a look at what your organizational policies have in place. Some of your staff may have already completed these pieces. So that's the first thing I would instruct you to do. We're going to go ahead and take you all off mute and see if you have additional questions for me. And if you could just wait a minute as we do that. Okay, everybody is off mute. Is there any other questions I can answer?
I have a question again. It's Ann Chernin. So is this only needs to be completed on somebody who the funding from the grant is covering? So, for example, our volunteer coordinator, her salary, part of it is the grant is covering a portion of her salary. So is she the only, and that's the only part of the funding that, so is that she the only one that needs to be covered?
Yes, in that scenario, yes.
Okay, great. Just to clarify, if the grantee has staff that we use as branch, is the check required?
I didn't hear that question. There was some breakup on the line. Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, this is Greg Strader. I understood that if match funds would be utilized, that individual too would require the three-part check. Do I understand correctly?
Yes, that's correct. So for any charges of staff time that are related to the CNCF federal side or the match side. Let's see, I see another question about, is the check also required for volunteers? It is not. We ask you to follow your own procedures for background checks for volunteers. And I see a question about, is there a one-stop shop for these background checks? We found the answer is no. However, we can direct you to some resources that may work. We found school districts, Department of Children and Families, and the VEX system 3 resources that we could direct you to. Other questions about the background check?
I submitted this through the chat. If you already have on file the certification from last year, do you need us to resubmit?
Thanks for that question. We do need it to be resubmitted, yes, because this is a new contract year. We don't need the 3-part check rerun if the gap in service has been less than 120 days. We do recommend that the NSOPR is run every year.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we do see a couple more questions, and we will respond to those when we get to those exhibits, and we'll move on to the next exhibit from here. Okay, so our next one is about the periodic expense report. Debbie.
Good morning, everyone. So we refer to this as a PER. Basically, this is the monthly invoice that you will submit to Volunteer Florida. On this form, you will have 2 columns, one that says CNCS, the other is grantee. The CNCS column is where you need to place the expenses that you are requesting reimbursement for. The grantee are those expenses that you are claiming as part of your match that you're required to meet. So when you do this, there are formulas built into it. If you'll just allow the formulas to calculate, you shouldn't have any problems with it. The invoices are due to us by the 15th of the month. So December, you would submit that no later than the 15th of January. Make sure that you sign and date the PER. An electronic signature is acceptable. And then you need to mail those to the mailbox that's listed. It's PER@volunteerflorida.org. Make sure that you copy Audrey on that. And her email address is on the screen as well. So again, make sure you sign it and date it. Electronic signature is acceptable. The CNCS column, you're going to record the expenses that you're requesting reimbursement of. The grantee column will be where you're recording the expenses that you're using as part of your match. And remember, you must provide supporting documentation for both expenses under CNCS and match. And by supporting documentation, what you're going to need to provide is, if it's personnel expenses, we're going to be looking for either copies of salary warrants or payroll registers. You're going to need to submit timesheets for those staff persons. And we're going to look at the percentage of time. So when you calculate it, if that person is not 100% funded by VGF, you're going to need to determine what percentage of their time is allocated to VGF, and only that portion of their salary can be claimed. So in your budget, you may have put 20%, but in all actuality, they may only be doing 15%. So you're going to need to keep an eye on that. But we're going to be looking for supporting documentation of expenses, invoices, proof of payment, because remember, this is a cost reimbursement, so you're going to have to show that you've paid for the expense prior to the reimbursement being issued. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Any questions from anyone?
You're going to have to print out every time.
Okay, we have nothing in the chat box yet, so great. So we're going to move on. If you have any questions, we can always come back and talk about it, okay?
I'd like to add just one thing, Debbie. Thank you so much. When we're talking about your PERs and getting reimbursed for your expenses, it's really important that you submit these on time and get started with that process. It's not acceptable to wait until 3 months into your contract or something like that, because what we found is when organizations submit the first time, they can have a lot of questions, and we really want to get all of that ironed out and clear for you at the very beginning of the 10-month contract period. So we really do expect that first invoice will come in very soon, even if you have marginal costs to charge to it. And we'll be providing you further training at the Volunteer Generation Fund training in January. But for program or fiscal people, just be aware we do expect that every month.
Thank you, Kat. Okay, so let's talk a few minutes about Exhibit 5. This is your budget revision request form. And what you're going to use this form for is if you need to make a change to your budget to a specific line item within the budget. Keeping in mind, you have to stay within the categories that were in the original budget, but you can move expenses around within those line items. So what you would do on that form, on the budget revision request form, you're going to start out with your original budget amount. The center portion of it is going to be where you're going to make your changes and move within those line items, either increasing or decreasing. The last column should automatically populate based on what you've entered in the center column. There are formulas built into this, so it should automatically calculate for you. Again, this is a form that you will need to sign and date. You must submit it prior to making any changes to your budget. It's going to be submitted to the same mailbox where you're submitting your monthly invoice. So you're going to submit it to per@volunteerflorida.org. One of the things that you need to keep in mind is you cannot increase your CNCS portion of the budget. If you decrease it, we're no longer doing a budget revision. Now we're having to do a contract amendment. The same thing with match under the grantee share. We don't recommend that you increase that, but if for some reason you've submitted a lot more in your budget for match than what's required, and you realize you're not going to be able to meet that early on, we need to talk about that and see if we want to do a contract amendment. Just keep in mind, any change to that bottom line number for either CNCS or grantee is going to require a contract amendment. I'm sorry. So do we have any questions? Okay, we have something in the chat. No? Okay, well, if you have questions, you can always reach out to me or to Audrey. We'll be happy to walk you through this form. Just keep in mind that you need to do the revision before you start to make those changes. It needs to be reviewed and approved by Volunteer Florida before you start making those changes within line items within your budget, okay? We can move on, I think, Audrey.
All right, so we're going to get into Exhibit 6, the reporting guidance. And so in the contract package, it is just a template of the types of questions we're going to be asking you to report to Volunteer Florida about your skills-based volunteers and programs. It's in 3 simple sections. The first one is the demographics. This is where we'll be capturing those performance measures of skills-based volunteers recruited and the number of hours that they are serving. We're going to ask other questions, such as maybe the number of seniors that you are capturing, the number of youth. I think there's the number of vets. There's some other options in there. If you capture that, we would really love for you to report it. If not, then that's okay. We just need the skills-based volunteers and the number of hours. In Section 2, we have the activities where you're going to talk about some of the great successes and challenges that you've had throughout the grant period. And so we are really looking for great stories from you in these boxes, because we do use that for our social media and for our other Volunteer Florida PR. And we would really love to share your stories around the state. And then Section 3 is for STEM and My Brother's Keeper Initiative. If you opted into that special consideration, it is in your application, and there are extra questions we're going to ask you, such as the number of volunteers you engaged in with your STEM programs or the My Brother's Keeper. And there are extra boxes where you'll put in the types of activities that you've done with them also. The reporting dates are on the screen as well as in your contract. You're going to just do 2 reports. It's going to be a mid-year, which would be due May 15th, and an end-of-year due October 15th. And those reports will be run and submitted through MicroEdge.
And also, if I could just add, so the objectives of this grant, I shared with you before, increasing the capacity of organizations and increasing the number of skills-based volunteers and the hours they leverage to meet critical needs. So those are the things that that are core in what we capture from you in your report. But being the governor's lead agency for volunteerism, we have a lot of opportunity to promote organizations and stories across the state. So I would encourage you to think about the human interest piece as well as the numbers, and send us those exciting individual volunteer stories or amazing events that your organizations are doing, because we often have the opportunity to promote that in accordance to, say, April as Florida Volunteer Month, or other days of service throughout the year.
Okay, and moving on is the next exhibit is the W-9 and the vendor EFT form. I think they're pretty straightforward. It's 3 sheets. We just need you to fill out and to submit to us via MicroEdge.
Okay, great. So we have a training for you. It's an online training. It's called the CNCST Concepts of Financial and Grants Management. This is your Exhibit 8. And the link is in your contract, and it's also included here. We ask that one person from your organization complete the training, and we've provided you a document to certify that you've completed it. The reason this is important, it's a standard practice for us at Volunteer Florida for all of our grantees to have one or more staff complete this, because it will give you a sense of the federal grant requirements for CNCF funds, and we found it to be really critical in educating the field about those requirements. So again, the training link is on the screen, and the documentation to upload to MicroEdge is included in your contract packet. And I'll pause there. If anybody has questions about the financial training, the reporting, or the W-9 or EFT form, go ahead and share those with us now via chat or online.
If you have these documents from prior grant sessions, you need them anew.
Yes.
Okay.
We see a question about how long does the training take?
It's probably going to take you 10 or 15 minutes to do it. It's not very long. It's very helpful in understanding some of the grant questions that you may have explained.
Other questions on the line or in the chat?
So for this particular training, would this be typically the finance director to take it?
Great question.
It's going to be very helpful for the individual that is going to be submitting your monthly invoices, or the person that has completed the budget. Now, if that's not the same person, you may want, since it's not a really long training, you may want to have both of them take it so they understand it. But definitely the person that's going to be submitting your monthly invoice for you, because there's some questions in there that would probably be very beneficial to them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I'll just add one more thing, just in the chat. For those of you that have other...
Oh, they have it on the screen? Oh, I guess.
Okay, we'll go ahead and mute the line. And for those of you that have other national service programs at your organizations, AmeriCorps State and National, Senior Corps, AmeriCorps Vista, any of those types of other national service grants, please be aware that the impact, the cost, everything must be kept very separate. This is the same federal funder and funding source. So, for example, it's important that the volunteers engaged and leveraged are not those associated with any other national service program, and that the expenses that you charge or are identified in your grant are also not associated or in any way duplicative. If you have questions about some of the interplay between different national service grants, there shouldn't be any in terms of the finances or the impact, but we're happy to talk with you offline about that as well.
Okay. So the last exhibit is Exhibit 9. It is your contract checklist. So definitely there are lots of things that are thrown at you, and there are a lot of things that we need back, and so this contract checklist is really just for you to verify that you have submitted everything. And then it also includes, it talks about how we would like your most recent audit statement along with your copies of insurance policies for the ones listed below. And so again, it's just a check sheet, which will remind you that all of these external documents are due January 1st, 2016. Again, it's the completion of the provider mutual agreement, the proof of the completion of the financial grants management training, your Exhibit 3 and your NSO PRs that need to be attached with that, your completed W-9 and EFT, your recent audit statement, and the copies of the insurance policies. And then you would also upload the checklist to let us know that you verified that you have done everything on your end.
And just let me add, the completed W-9, if we do not have that prior to the first reimbursement, it's going to hold up your payment. So that is one of the ones that you need to make sure that we receive timely so that we can get you set up in our accounting system. Again, without that, we cannot issue payment to you. So don't forget that one. Really important.
Okay, and then briefly, I'm just going to show you what MicroEdge would look like on your guys' behalf. So when I sent out the email with the contract information, there was a link in there. You'll log in using the same information you did for the application and for the clarification. But I just want to make sure to highlight that when you log in, everything will be shown under requirements. So it always defaults to application, and that's just how the system is. So when you log in, you'll hit the green button that says requirements, and then all of these forms will show up for you. You should see 8 different requirements. The first one is Step 1, and that again has your hyperlink that has all of your contract information in it. Step 2 is the uploading of that mutual provider agreement so we can download it and send it over to our CEO to execute. And then again, the other ones are the requirements required that are listed on the contract checklist. Again, it's your Exhibit 3, your Exhibit 7, your Exhibit 8, your Exhibit 9, copies of your insurance, and your recent audit. And then just to have some information, and we'll go over some more like live versions at the training, if you have opened it for the very first time, if you have never opened it for the very first time, it'll show under New. If you've opened it before and you press like Save and Finish Later, it's going to be saved under the In Progress requirements. And then if you did submit it, it's going to show under the Submitted requirements. And then once you submit it, you get an automated notice saying, thank you for submitting this. And then you also get an email in your inbox. So there are 3 ways to verify that you have submitted something on your side. And then again, we get notifications on our side. And so that's just briefly about MicroEdge in your contracting package. Again, it's very similar, same style as the application and the clarification information. Okay, and so then lastly, we have some upcoming reminders for you. The 2 things that outside of the contracting that are going to be coming up is I am going to be sending an email linking you to our online community called Wigio. For those of you that have been with Volunteer Florida VGF in the past, we used this last year. It's a really great just landing community. I try not to bombard all of your emails with like updates and information and attachments, and so I do use this kind of as a landing page. I'll put sample timesheets for you guys. the NSOPR sample, so in case you're concerned about what it should look like. I also post really great articles about volunteer management. Sometimes I post YouTube videos about like STEM projects you can do, just anything that can help enhance your grant year with us. And then you also can feel free to reach out to other grantees in that also. But you'll get a lot more information in a live demonstration at the training. But just look for an email from me. And then we hope that you are writing down the date of the training. It's going to be January 20th to 22nd, 2016 in Orlando, Florida. Coming soon, we will be sending you the exact details and how to register. And we do ask that we want one program person and one finance representative at this training.
And Audrey, if I could add, the Volunteer Generation Fund training is really an awesome way to connect with your colleagues, with your peers, and gain incredible expertise from our presenters and trainers. It's a requirement, and it's in your contract package, so you should have those dates. And the other important note I want to make is for the finance and program participants. We have a separate finance track, or will have, for your finance folks. And the content mostly for the VGF training is for your program folks. But will have a separate session for your finance individuals. We work hard to bring in outside trainers and internal experts so that you can really have a sense of the scope of the Volunteer Generation Fund grant nationally and in the state of Florida. And we really look forward to welcoming you to Orlando and providing you that training in just a few weeks. So please do look for more information to come on those details. Debbie and Audrey, any other things to add? Or let's open it to see if there's any final questions. So you are all officially unmuted if you all have any final questions.
With the training, is it a requirement that a finance person goes, or would it be sufficient if just the program person went?
No, there's a need for the finance person to go in addition to the program staff. However, the financial portion of the VGF training is limited, so there may be the option for that finance staff to just come for the day.
Is it a full 3 days that we require 2 nights for 2 people in Orlando for this?
That's correct, and Volunteer Florida does cover those costs.
The cost of the hotels?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, we see the training as being another resource and an asset that we can bring to your organization. So we do cover the costs associated with the training.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Well, we look forward to being in touch very soon with more training information and to support you in the uploads of your contract documents, and look forward to meeting you all as well. We see ourselves as, of course, your funder, but also your partner in making Florida stronger and safer and smarter, and we can all do that together in accomplishing that mission. So we look forward to seeing you more in just a few weeks. And please let us know if we can support you in any way between now and then.
Wait, Kat, I have a quick question. This is Natasha at the Tallahassee Museum. When is the volunteer management training? The Leon County, we usually do, I think it's Volunteer Leon puts it on.
Yes, I think, Natasha, you're speaking about the Florida Association of Volunteer Resource Managers and their training schedule?
Yes.
Yeah, I am not aware of that training schedule, so I cannot answer that question right now, but I can look into it for you.
Okay, that one's not going to be a part of the grant this year?
Great question. No, it is not part of this grant, but we will be talking about FAVRM and resources at our VGF training.
Okay. When will we know who our fellow grantees are?
When will you know who your fellow grantees are? Likely you'll know that in January at the training. Eventually, you'll be able to connect with everybody on Wigio when everybody joins that online community. And then Volunteer Florida will likely do a press release of our grantees in the near future as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks for your time, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.